waterwaystravel.com, Scott. Travel intelligently, your number one surf travel concierge.
Yeah, Waterways, Brian and Sarah and the crew at Waterways are going to take care of all of your surf, surf travel needs. And I've been working with Waterways recently as I'm going to Tavarua. So they've been exceptional. I mean, the amount of customer service that I'm getting from them is just top notch, top shelf, premium. And of course, they're the experts. They've been doing it for decades. So why wouldn't you use the best, especially when it comes to something as important as your surf travel?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty that you will also need to remember to pack and all that sort of stuff. Plenty of minutia involved with travel. So you might as well leave the big stuff to them and just kind of put you in the right place at the right time, give you advice on what to bring. So go to waterwaystravel.com for anywhere you want to go for any level of wave quality. And then also they're doing that 𝐂𝐻EA Heart Surf experience that we've talked about before, where 𝐂𝐻EA goes and he trains everybody. It's at Salani Surf Resort in Samoa. They're doing 2 different weeks. The trip is only 1 week, so you could pick to go the first week or the second week, and it's limited to 10 people per week, and there's still a couple of spaces open. It's in April 12th through the 18th, and then April 19th through the 25th of 2025 to Samoa. So get in on that if you are interested at waterwaystravel.com. And then also our good friends at Surf NVS are with us today as well, as a reminder for where to buy your fins.
Oh my, Surf NVS. Look, that's the other part of surf travel, and I'm in the middle of it right now, which is fin and board anxiety. and
Are you bringing 3?
boards?
Yeah.
No, I'm not sure. That's the problem.
Well, what potential numbers could you bring?
I mean, I could bring 3 boards. I'm
Oh, okay.
probably bringing 2 boards and a foil board.
Oh, I see. I see.
Yeah, because I'm going
That
to go
does add
foiling as well.
complexity.
In
Yeah.
fact, yeah. So but I don't have foil anxiety. I know what to bring regarding that. It's my surfboard suggestions. And maybe when we get into the show, I'll throw some ideas at you and you can help me.
Okay, I like it. Well, for NVS, I will let people know if you watched the electric acid surfboard test this past week, the most recent episode, episode 3, they heavily focus on fins, and there's really good information. But go to Surf NVS and then click on the fin guide, and they have a really, really simple tutorial there. I've used it for years. I've referenced this. There's little diagrams that they draw that are very simple to understand, and it shows you things like depth and height, what the base of the fin kind of extending the base does, what the height of the fin extending that does, what sweep and rake mean and what they do, what hold and release means, what can't means, what toe means. Again, with very simple diagrams, and then links to the various fins and how they apply in each of those situations. So if you've ever heard those terms and they were slightly confusing to you, or you didn't know how they applied to fins, they've got a great fin guide on surfnvs.com.
As we see some movement at the takeoff zone, it's Kelly Slater grabbing rail. A clean entry, this thing holding open, it spits.
When it spit me, I thought it was going to spit me off my board.
Comes out with the spit, spits him out. Comes out after the spit. Gets spat out of another good-looking wave here. Spit.
We're just spitballing, right? Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, a guy, David. Welcome to Spit. It is Tuesday, November 5th, and this is Spit, where we talk all things surf. David Lee Scales and Scott Bass here with you. And man, we got a busy show. There's quite a bit of news out there. Hawaii's been pumping. Must-see moment. We've got, of course, the electric acid surfboard test, which Stab puts on with this year Dave Rastovich. And other stuff. I mean, there's always a shark attack here or there, like there's a lot going on in the world of surfing. So good morning to you, David.
Good morning to you, Scott. And you totally obfuscated the lead, which is your huge article on Stab Magazine. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, that was nice of Sam. The important takeaway there is that I'm not the story. The story is the surfboards and the surfboard builders, and it was really nice of those guys to do that.
Well, there's a giant picture of your face on the homepage when I open it up, so you are part of the story. It seems that you've made a big enough splash in this last month for people to want to know what is going on with Scott Bass and all of the surfboard stuff that he's involved in. So the article is Sam McIntosh interviewing you about the recent boardroom show, its origins, and of course the California Gold Surf Auction. So lots of great info there. I liked it. I liked his questions.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to do. But let me get into my surfboard anxiety because
Well, that's why I like his questions. One of his questions was, what board would you rely on the most? Like, what would you rely? And you said there's a specific shaper who I fully trust, and I always bring one of his boards to Indo.
yeah,
A great question.
yeah, it is. It is a good question, and it was an easy answer for me. But I'm not going to Indo. I'm going to Fiji, and the swell is set up so it's going to be fun. There's going to be tons of fun little waves, 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 4 to 6. And so here's my dilemma. If I can bore you with this. I told you what the waves are going to be like: 2 to 3, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 2 to 3, like that. Like 1 or 2 days of 4 to 6 foot waves at Cloudbreak, which frankly, because I haven't surfed there in over 2 decades, I'm like, which board? Like, I know if I go to Indo and it's 6 feet, I know what board to bring, you know? And I have a Christensen, a really beautiful pulled in tail, a quad that's ideal for driving through tubes. You know, it's not going to be like a super radical top turner board. It's more of a point and shoot.
What size?
6'6".
Perfect.
And I feel like at Cloudbreak, I'm going to want something that's more off the bottom, off the top, set the rail under that little almond eye. I don't know that it's going to be, you know, take off and friggin' Mach 7 high line it the whole way. You know, I always see guys going down to the bottom and doing big arcing top turns. And so anyway, I've got the 6'6".
Okay.
I also have a small wave board that Ryan Sakel made me, which is a Twinser, which I'm going to bring, which by the way, I ordered some fins for. We need to talk about that later. And then I have a 6'2", just a stock round tail tri-fin that's super reliable, that I know, like I could ride it in 2 foot waves and I could ride it in 6 foot waves. So I'm torn, but I'm definitely bringing the Ryan Sakel because I just ordered new fins for it for this trip after watching Dave Rastovich and Vince Longo, Future Fins, talking about that new 3.2. So I'm bringing the Sakel. So it's like, do I bring the 6'6" or do I bring the 6'2"? And I don't know.
So
that's where I'm struggling. There's going to be maybe 1 day, maybe 2 days of 4 to 6 foot Cloudbreak, which does that mean it's like chest to head high, or does that mean it's head high with larger sets? I don't know.
I would bring the Christensen because the thruster is just doubling up on the style of waves that you would prefer to ride the Sakel in, probably. If the waves are, you know, so you basically want a board that you can ride in the bigger, juicier surf. And the Sakel is at the Dark Arts construction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So see that I think of that board's
So
fast.
wide tail twin.
That board's super fast and it's 6 foot Cloudbreak. The wave has all the speed you need. So you just need to harness the speed. And so that's where I ride the Christensen.
Okay. I think you're right. But I'm concerned about that. The Twinser, the wide tailed Twinser out at Cloudbreak backside. I think it's way too much tail and too much speed for that wave. So I'm thinking, and what's weird is I'm thinking the Christensen is almost too pulled in.
So bring 3, dude. Let me throw. I don't want to make this more confusing for you, but you used to talk about a Pat Rawson quad that you had that you ride in pretty good waves.
I feel like
that board would be the replacement for the Christensen. What size is
weird.
that?
I pulled them both out and I measured their tails and they're like the exact same tail. Like I thought the Rawson would be a little wider, a little bit more user friendly, more turning.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And
what is that board called?
The Impala.
That's right. The Impala. What size is that? 7
they're
something?
Both 6'6".
Oh,
they're basically
6'6".
kind of the same board. The Impala has a little wider wide point and like it's just more of kind of a 70s single finish outline. It's just the Christensen's a little more pulled in and more performance oriented in the nose.
Have you ridden the Christensen backside?
No, I've
Yeah.
only ridden it in super fast rights where you just get on your horse and use the whip.
Yeah.
See where my dilemma is?
Yeah, well, you're making it harder than it needs to be by insisting on bringing the 𝐂𝐮, which I agree, that's kind of the best all-rounder. But if you want to just have two plots on opposite ends of the graph, you would bring the thruster for small surf and then the Christensen for bigger surf.
But the thruster's not really a small surf. Like if I'm in 2 to 3 foot waves and I could choose between the 𝐂𝐮 twinser and the thruster, I'd rather have the twinser.
Yeah, but
Especially after watching the electric acid surfboard test. I'm like,
you're in your head though, you're thinking going right. You just said you're concerned about going left on that board and you're primarily going left.
no. But see, I'm going to go right at like swimming pools and Wilkes Pass. And you know what I mean? Like when it's 2 to 3 foot, I'm not going out to cloud break. I'm just going to go over. I'm probably going to be foiling, quite frankly. And I could see myself surfing Wilkes when it's, 3 to 4 feet on a right hander.
I guess the reality is the Christensen, even if you haven't ridden it backside and you're concerned about its maneuverability, it still has enough maneuverability for you to be able to swoop and do like a big bottom turn and an arcing top turn backside at 6 foot cloud break.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to do that.
Yeah. You're not going to be like angling off the bottom and trying to crack the lip, even if you had the appropriate board for that when it's 6 foot cloud break at this point.
No doubt. I agree. I agree.
So get the bigger board, easier to paddle, easier to harness the speed. You'll make it to the end section. Hopefully you can tuck into a pocket.
We hope so. Anyway, we'll see. It's going to be fun.
My favorite part, not to jump too far into the electric acid conversation, but when Dave was talking about an experience of surfing cloud break and how important the fins were, he was like, yeah, I was out there and it was like, 4 to 6 foot and the board just couldn't really hold. I really felt undergun. And then I swapped out the fins and oh my gosh, it was locked in. It was such a good board. And they show imagery. It was freaking like triple overhead. It was like a proper 12-foot faces. And he kept referring to it as like 4 to 6 feet, maybe a couple 8-footers. I'm like, dude, it is huge out there.
I don't think that those photos were coinciding with his commentary. That's my take on it.
I thought that they would not have used the photos unless that was the exact board fin setup that he was talking about. Because it was very I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've ordered those the Alpha 3.2 fins from Futures this morning. I watched the electric acid surfboard test for the second time, episode 3, and I got those. I think it's the Alpha Reverse 3.2. Is it called the Reverse? Yeah.
I don't know what the name is, but sounds like what they were talking about. Should we go ahead and get into it then?
I mean, I guess so, because here we are. We're in it.
I mean, how can you avoid it? And you're right. I've been watching each episode twice as well. There's that much information to digest.
Yeah, this one, you were so right too. This one was really all about the fins. I think it's fascinating. I think it's something that we should all really kind of, you and I've been trying to push how important changing out the fins can be for the feel of a board. And it's just, sometimes it feels like it falls on deaf ears. We're just, as a culture, I don't know what it is, and maybe it's just me, but it feels like most of us just don't change out our fins as often as we should. And most of us don't realize how absolutely important it is to the board design. So much so that Neil Purchase Jr. and many shapers tell you which fins you need to ride for this board design. Like a set of fins comes with this board and don't ride any other fins other than this. And, that's to be discussed as well. But, man, this whole episode was about the fins, and I'm here for it.
Totally agree. I think it's interesting. You're right. I think we do become complacent. Even you and I, who talk about it all the time and the importance of it, I get complacent. I find something that works. I'm going to the beach. I don't want to overthink it. And it's like, I just use what I think works. But when you're somebody as astute as Dave Rastovich, even when Neil Purchase Jr., who he's had a friendship with for 30 years and surfed with throughout all that, Neil Purchase says, this is a Widowmaker setup. Here's the fins. Dave looks at it and goes, Widowmaker doesn't work for me. It doesn't go fast enough. So Dave grabs his own setup, which is actually two big, basically twin fins, and then one small trailing fin. And Neil even says, he goes, that's not the twin fins placement. Like, that's a Widowmaker placement. I would have put the boxes in a different place if I knew that he was going to ride a twin fin in it. But Dave knows his surfing so well, knows board design so well, he can make that adjustment, despite the shaper's knowledge base. So it all becomes very confusing. He's more astute, I guess, than you and I are, and he knows his surfing better than you and I know our own surfing. So it's complex. It's very complex.
It is, and it's sort of a paradox, because I just spoke about how Neil sells you a board with fins, and then I'm sort of a huge fan of there's no right way. Like, let's change it all around, and that's what Dave did in this episode, and I think that tends to be the case. Like, by the way, that board, what does he call it? The whale's tongue, the Neil Purchase Jr. whale's tongue. That's my favorite board of this episode.
Oh, cool.
I found that outline, but I wouldn't get it as a 2+1. I'd get it as a quad. Like, I looked at it and I went, that's an insane little quad design,
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I wonder if Neil will now start doing it as a quad.
Well, if you watch it, and I know you have, he goes, this is the design that's based off of, I think it's called the Cortez model. And he shows it, and they're quads.
Yeah.
Because that's a bit, it's Michael Peterson and the Cortez model. It's
Right.
somewhere in between. And the Cortezes are quads, and it looks like a beautiful quad design in a very simple, sleek, little rounded outline, which I think is cool.
Well, I feel like I told you this at some point, but I just got a new yin yang twin from Dead Kooks. It's a 6'6". And when Eden Saul from Dead Kooks was telling me about developing that design, he had been doing it. He'd probably shaped 1,000 of them, and he was doing them with channels, twin fin with channels. And Dave Rastovich was riding a couple of them, and he wanted some adjustments to be made. And he found one in Eden's rafters that was shaped without channels, like that he had done in the first iteration of the design. And Dave goes, let me ride that. So Dave wrote it, brought it back, and goes, bro, this thing's way better without channels. And so now Eden does them all without channels. But in his mind, he had done 1,000 already. And that was the path that he was committed to. You needed somebody like Dave, that quality of surfer. And ultimately, to be honest, I've never seen a more astute surfer and communicator who understood design better. And I think Kelly Slater might be able to be included in that conversation, or is included in that conversation. But for my style of communication, Dave does an even more effective job, and he seems to understand design better. And so this whole electric acid surfboard test has been, the gold standard kind of for learning about surfboards and being able to witness what the person is talking about instead of just kind of imagining it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting when you think about Dave, and you've seen him body surf. Like, to me, the guy's an incredible water person. So it seems like he's almost so in tune with what's happening with the waves. I've seen him body surf. You've seen him body surf. He's like a dolphin.
Yeah.
And so he can take that sense of what's happening and how to ride a wave, even with his body, get on a surfboard and he's just so connected in some way, almost in an ethereal connection, that it's pretty fascinating. So
it really is. Well, this episode really interestingly starts off with old archival footage of Dave Rastovich from 20 plus years ago, young man hiking in to surf some slabby wave in Tasmania. And it's the segment probably from a surf video that I hadn't seen previously, but they get to this wave and it's triple overhead, 15-foot faces easily, and gurgling on a shelf and absolutely slabbing, like super dangerous, close to the cliff, sketchy wave. And Dave paddles out there, and to see somebody figure out a wave for the first time and really make adjustments and kind of sort it out with a lot of consequence was pure poetry and like the stuff of genius, kind of, like really incredible high skill wave rider. But then when he gets out of the water, the conversation that he has with the cameraman is about fins. So Dave has been having this kind of level of detail in his articulation and understanding of design for that long. He was 20 years old in that clip.
Yeah. And, as he says in the piece too, he just doesn't like center finned surfboards. And as a young man, surfing in Burley Heads in that sort of competitive arena where they're all riding these really chippy, rockered out three fins, he's kind of disgusted with what's offered to him. At some point, he's like, what, I'm out. I'm going to Lennox and I'm going to ride twin fins.
Which leads to archival 30-year-old footage of him and Neil Purchase Jr. surfing together. I think Neil's a little older, but Dave's 20, so Neil's a little bit older than that. They're surfing together way back then, having these discussions back then. And then, of course, cutting to modern footage of Purchase Jr. saying like, yeah, I was the one, not the one, but I was one of the people who encouraged Dave to explore those thoughts of alternative designs that he was having. So in terms of narrative arc, Danny Johnson, again, did a phenomenal job of resurfacing that old footage, tying it in with this current conversation with Neil Purchase Jr. and the board that ultimately Dave rides in the event, which, like I said, goes from a Widowmaker to a twin +1.
Well, I want to ask you about this. Because I think it's really astute of Neil Purchase Jr. to go, hey, look, if you order a board from me, here's the fins I think you need to ride. Shouldn't every shaper do that? Shouldn't shapers be designing surfboards with the fin that makes sense for the design? That seems like a no-brainer, and I don't think enough board builders go there.
Great question. My initial thought is there's certain boards that kind of have a wide range of options for fins that would potentially work. And if they don't know the surfer who's going to be receiving the board, that's also a set of variables. So instead they just go, here you go. And like any set of thrusters will work. If you're big, get bigger fins or whatever kind of a thing. If you're going into more focused designs, or like this board is for this style of waves, then you definitely go down that path and you have that conversation with a surfer about where they're going to be riding the board. But I think, yes, the answer is yes for you. To your question, you should be doing that. But if you're just generally selling surfboards to the public and they're going to end up on a rack at retail, you have to leave some room for those variables. And so you probably, for the surfboard design, create a little bit wider berth, like create some less defined design elements that leave it open for variable.
Yeah, it just seems like if you're making it's like you don't design an airplane without the wings, And so, but you're absolutely right. There's a lot going on here. One is the retail market, the fin market, quite frankly. And like if you order a board for Pipeline, I guarantee you Eric Arakawa is like, here's some pretty good fins. Like they've kind of got the board for Pipeline nailed, more or less. Like, whoever it is. Channel Islands, Eric Arakawa, like whoever the like super hot Hawaiian shapers are. I feel like they're like, look, the waves are insane. It's 6 to 8 foot, huge hollow barrels. This is a good fin.
Yeah.
And I'm suggesting, and by the way, I'm not an expert. I'm suggesting that when you get to these alternative crafts for crappy waves, say around here in San Diego or in parts of California where there's, one day could be really fast and fun and one day's high tide and fat and you're searching for speed.
Yeah.
It allows you to kind of move around with fin placement and fin design and what you're going to put in the board. Whereas I feel like in Hawaii, it's like, dude, we know, like we've been doing this for 35 years. This is the board. This is the fin.
Well, now that I think about it, I have never bought a surfboard where there wasn't a conversation about what fins I should ride. Now, lots of times the fins didn't come with a board and they didn't demand that I ride a certain thing, but there was always a conversation.
Yeah. And I don't sense that Neil's demanding, but I think that he does strongly suggest, hey, I've designed this board with these fins in mind, and I've also ridden it, and this works pretty good this way. So, but you do you, you know?
Well, the second board that Rasta rides, which leads into this conversation that you were referring to with Vince Longo, was the Ryan Lovelace, which had previously been eliminated from the electric acid surfboard test. And Rasta, before he got to the fins, he actually assessed that the actual artwork on the deck of the board, the aesthetics of the board, were putting him off. It had these horizontal stripes. And he's like, those just do my head in, like I don't like it. So he originally said, can I sand that off? Then realized I could just paint over it. So he paints over the board and then takes it out and has kind of an epiphany on it. He's like, this thing's kind of amazing, but something's off with the fins. So then he sets off. I don't know if you want to do a better job of explaining it than I do, but he sets off to kind of make an adjustment to the fins, which is where Vince comes in and becomes a detour in the episode, like an episode within the episode almost, with Vince Longo. But what is that conversation that they had?
Well, I'll probably butcher it a little bit, but basically they talked about, setting up some new fins in that board with a different cant. So basically, fins, the way Vince explains it, fins, let's just say, start out straight, but we put cant and toe in them so that the board will release, so that the board's not stuck. And basically what they said is, look, cant and toe allows the board to break free. Why don't we, instead of putting the cant and toe in the base, let's put the cant and toe actually within the fin itself. So they put the cant and toe within the fin design rather than where it's set on the board. And in their experimentations with that, they realized, hey, for a twin fin, that's actually too loose and too crazy. That works good for a tri-fin setup where we need a little bit of spice, but we're going to actually tweak it the other way and reverse the cant and the toe for the twin fin setup so that we get a little bit more positivity and more drive out of the tips of the board. And that's about as good as I can do probably with explaining it. And that's that 3-2 future fin design they called the Alpha Reverse or the Alpha Reversible or something, which I just ordered, by the way, for the Ryan 𝐂𝐮𝐞𝐬𝐽 Twinser.
Yeah.
For Fiji.
So this board had already been eliminated from the competition. Dave brought it back, and with this adjustment made and the new spray on the deck, the thing turned on.
It did.
It turned on. Like Dave was doing progressive surfing. We were trying to come up with a term last show, but he was like now drifting the tail, like going vert, cracking it, drifting, kind of rail sliding through the lip, like full on unlock of a style of surfing that we had not seen in this competition thus far.
Which is why you and I are discussing fins now and why fins are so important. Like we've seen it, we watched it, and if that doesn't make us change our fins out and get a little bit more experimental, nothing will, because I thought that the Lovelace was done. Didn't look like he was surfing well on it in the first episode. And wow. And it looked like two different boards.
And yeah, two different boards from kind of the dud pile completely to maybe the winner of the event. So huge difference with a subtle adjustment. And again, to give credit to Dave's astuteness, he came to this conclusion about the cant and the toe of the fin on his own. He has a relationship, a partnership with Futures. So he called, after kind of a number of experiments in the water, called the Futures guy in Australia and was like, can we make this adjustment? And the Futures guy in Australia said, funny you should ask. Vince has been taking what you've been saying and applying it theoretically on the computer with all the modeling and came to the same conclusion and already designed the fin, already manufactured the fin, and it should be at your doorstep tomorrow. And in fact, it was. So he and Dave, one through theory and one through practice, landed on the same conclusion, and he was in the water the next day. And that's the footage we see of him just lighting it up.
Yeah, pretty exciting.
Crazy.
The whole fin thing is really cool. And I mean, like it feels like we've done everything we can do with the surfboard. Like we know pinched rails, full rails, bottom contours, wings, stings, outlines, and everything we've done to the surfboard. We have all the variables in place. It's like a piece to the puzzle. You can kind of move them around and put them wherever you want. And now, really, it feels like the major breakthroughs are happening in the last 5 years in fin design. And and it's a lot of it is through this computational fluid dynamics, which they're starting to apply to surfboard fins.
Well, I think the other thing that made this series so successful for me, the secret ingredient was time. They took 3 months to film. And so him being able to bring back the Ryan Lovelace and go through this kind of thing where we can manufacture a new set of fins for it. We have that much lead time. Surfing the boards in a variety of different conditions made this series a lot. It's just doing more justice, I think, to the surfboard shapers, because it would have been unfair, let's say, for Ryan Lovelace for that board to be dispatched if, it ultimately had the potential that it was intended for. So I'm glad that they took as much time as they did to do this. And by the way, the idea of bringing surfboards back that were you initially eliminated also makes this really, really interesting, because the Donald Brink gets resurrected as well. The Donald Brink, which broke in the previous episode, they took the time to get fixed, and it looked great on that too. It ultimately still got eliminated, but seeing Dave be able to go through that process and bring it back, I think, was also very, very interesting.
Yeah, it was. And this brings up the point that is fascinating to me, or not fascinating, but I think is important, and is we need to bring it up, is Dave talks about wanting a surfboard that he doesn't have to think about. And with Donald's board, he felt like he had to think too much, basically. And for Dave, and I think for all of us, if we have a magic carpet where we don't think about it, we just look where we want to go and the board goes there, and there's that feeling, right? And Dave surfs these really good waves there where he lives, and they're good waves. And so I think they lend themselves to a more simple surfboard. You don't need to get crazy when you're surfing 4-foot sand bottom peelers. A simple surfboard is probably going to work great. And he says as much. And so when you take the concept of, hey, we're going to give you all these crazy boards, but we're going to surf in this really good setup, these really good waves, it makes it, on some level, I'm like, we already know the good board for these waves. It's a Gary McNeil's. He loves that board.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think to myself, these boards need to be surfed in kind of not as optimal surfing waves, because they're made for not optimal surfing waves.
Yeah.
So I don't know,
Well, that's why he entered this with a conversation about lax and longevity, building a board that won't break down, because he knows what he wants. And now that he knows the magic board and how to, the design that he wants, let's make it so that it lasts for decades. And that was the initial conceit of the series.
Yeah, they've done such a good job with this series. And so we're sort of at the point now where we're trying to fine tune it, you and I and the rest of the listeners. And like you said, this was the best one ever. I can tell you're shaking your head like it's good. It doesn't need to be fine tuned anymore. And I'm not saying it does. Maybe I'm being hypercritical. It just feels like these boards are, some of them are out there, like the John Simon, the Brink, and David talks about, he says, look, these boards are made by California shapers because they have slow, crappy waves, basically. That's why California board makers make strange boards, to make the boards more stimulating, because the waves aren't stimulating. And Dave's like, I have stimulating waves right here.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I really am not even critiquing much on this series. It's more just marveling at it and getting into going deeper into what Dave's talking about. The next
the Brink, so it buckled. The rocker was tweaked a little bit because of the buckle. As Donald Brink said, and I think this is another point that we can't hammer home hard enough. Rocker is everything.
I know.
Rocker's everything. Once we get that, then we can move into other areas. But I guess the board didn't quite go the way Dave wanted it to go, and so he got rid of it.
It looked better than I thought Dave gave it credit for, to be honest. It was like a little bit longer, but super maneuverable for the length. I thought I mean, I think that it would have performed even better without obviously that adjustment to the rocker profile and without the brake. But, he said basically there was times where he kind of wanted it to go up here and it would go over there. And I think that's also maybe the asymmetry adds such a variable that it really needs to be designed specifically for a given surfer in mind in my head. Like if Donald worked with Dave and said, okay, you're going to be surfing here and it's Dave, he would design a board that would actually work precisely, is kind of the way that I felt about it.
Yeah.
But
that could be.
the next board that he rode was the Dane Reynolds.
The sperm whale. I actually love the looks of this surfboard. It looked a little bit too small for Dave, in my opinion. It was just too small and too thin. This was a board, by the way, again, now we have another clean, simple outline, a very basic outline, which I think works really good in the types of ways we saw him riding. And I was a fan of that board.
Dave was a fan of that board too.
Almost too much. And that's another thing that he brought up. It was kind of like, I understand this board already. And then you go, I don't understand these boards yet. And I want to understand these boards. And because I know what this board is, I'm just going to throw it out because it was almost like a date that was too easy. And he's bored. He wants to go figure out the girl that's challenging.
More complex.
Forgive the patriarchy. It's the best analogy I could come up with in the moment.
Well, I think he used a similar analogy at the end of the episode. He ultimately blew out the fin box on that board. So that was the downfall of that board, which again brings up the conversation about flax. We've broken a board already. We've blown out the fin box on a board. So not necessarily just inherently as strong as was led everybody to believe at the beginning of this series, but if used correctly, those things shouldn't be happening. In that segment, though, he does an excellent job explaining V versus concave.
Really good. I mean, that's a place where I actually learned. I wrapped my head around it. Like he's kind of made it very concise.
And that's things that you already knew before. We've heard described 20 times before at least. And yet his ability to communicate is like, oh, you're right. I wrapped my head around it in a way that I hadn't wrapped my head around it before. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really good.
Yeah.
The next board is the Andrini. I'd be curious to hear from Mark about this. It was long. As Dave pointed out, the tail is like kind of a high performance tail. It looked like it had a lot of nose rocker just from the way it was sitting on the water as he was surfing it, but it was long. So like those elements seem to be made for a certain design for sure. Like that's why I'd be curious to hear from Mark about it. Like who is this made for? What style of waves is it made for? Because I'm sure it works. But in the hollow kind of high performance surf that Dave was riding it in, he couldn't really unlock it.
Yeah, I think the long rail line was the real downfall here. I just think Mark made too big of a surfboard.
Yeah.
And, he would have, it would have been nice if there was a 6.2 instead of a 7.2 or whatever it was.
Yeah, completely. Well, then they'd cut to a little segment with Torren Martyn. Surprise guest appearance by Torren Martyn showing up to ride a couple of these boards. And they get a little bit of a session with the two of them riding. Waves weren't super good, seemed like a little drained out, but Torren got to ride the Fletcher Chouinard board, which I think everybody would agree might be the front runner in this series so far. So it's cool to see Torren. That
was cool. That was another fun little twist. That's part of the charm of these series is the little twists that they throw. They throw Kelly in the first episode right there at the beginning. They throw Torren in here, a little twist, the Vince and Dave conversation, a little twist, and, bringing boards back. All of these little things that these guys do, the producers, the director too, incredible. So I love the little twist. I'm sure there will be more.
Well, again, the secret ingredient is time.
Yeah.
Those are all allowed to happen because you have 3 months of filming time.
Yeah, for sure.
So
hold on for just half a second.
Yeah, we'll be right back. HelloFresh.com/freesurf. Surfing, food, and wine, those are my passions that occupy my time and my headspace. But as adulthood and fatherhood has demanded more and more of my time, the act of surfing has gone from a daily exercise to a weekly thing. And the same thing has applied with shopping for meals. It's so consuming, and honestly, it's a bit wasteful. Whether it's buying a jar of something that I only need a tablespoon of, or maybe just a bunch of celery when I only need 2 stalks of it, an embarrassing amount of groceries either go into the trash at the end of the week or they just rot in the cupboard for a year until I do a deep cleaning. So HelloFresh has really simplified and streamlined our dinner life with pre-portioned ingredients delivered right to our door. These are restaurant quality, easy to make meals with simple instructions, and it's also less expensive and healthier than any takeout that we order. And they have over 50 different recipes to choose from each week. The menus are seasonal. So this week we have autumn-inspired dishes like shepherd's pie if you want something filling, or there was an herbed salmon over apple and kale salad that was great last week. We also loved the creamy cilantro flank steak bowl with garlic lime rice and charred greens. And again, this is all delivered to our door, pre-portioned, and it's easy to make. So go to HelloFresh.com/freesurf to sign up. We will get you 10 free meals applied across 7 boxes. That's for new subscribers only, and it varies by plan, but it is 10 free great restaurant quality meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/freesurf. It is America's #1 meal kit for a reason, and in fact, one that I have been using since 2017, believe it or not. So that's HelloFresh.com/freesurf.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back. The Duke IPA was the next board.
Yeah, and this is where we found out that Dave just doesn't like single fins, you know?
Yep.
And I thought that was a cool looking board. I love single fins because I love the way that they sort of center my surfing. They temper my surfing in a good way. They make me kind of stop tossing pizzas with my arms and pull me back, and I'm more just putting my arm in the wave and waiting for the wave to catch up and get some speed, and then I can run out with it. And so I feel like, and I do feel like there can be no better feeling in surfing than a bottom turn on a single fin. If everything lines up, it feels really pure. Could be because I learned on a single fin, and maybe I'm biased, but I don't ride single fins. I mean, I do have a 2+1, which I consider a single fin, which I love, but for the most part, around here, I'm looking for speed. Give me the speed and I'll deal with it. And,
Well, Rasta acknowledged the virtues of the single fin, but said, I am a very front-footed surfer. And what happens is once I get the speed and I go to do a turn and all my pressure's on the front foot, the back kind of releases. It lifts up. And so I can't control the board anymore. And that's exactly what happened. He would get up, get shacked, come out of the barrel, and then go to do a turn. And the thing just would, he'd tip over basically. He couldn't get the board on the rail to do like a proper carve. And so him acknowledging his style of surfing doesn't suit that style of board was the beginning, the middle, and the end.
yeah, I mean, I just don't think a single fin is going to do the type of surfing that we do these days, that this really radical full rail buried direction change, continue to get speed through the back half of the turn. Single fins are just more positional surfboards, and they're for a certain type of surfing. And
We'll talk to Larry Bertelman and Buttons about that. You know what I mean? Like, because they were riding the single fins that you're talking about, but then with the sting adjustment in the tail, that's what unlocked the radical turns that they became famous for, and which informed a lot of what we do now. And so I understood Duke's evolution of that and like trying to incorporate a much more modern style board with the single fin virtues still. I think it could work for somebody. Didn't work for Rasta.
It was a sexy looking surfboard.
I know. Yeah.
When he pulled into the tube on that thing, you could tell that the board was just centered inside the barrel. It just looked really neat. And so it's unfortunate, but I don't think he's a single fin guy.
Exactly. Admittedly so. Well, that leaves us with one episode left, and there are still 5 surfboards in the running: the John Simon, the Fletcher Chouinard, the Neil Purchase Jr., the Ryan Lovelace, and the Corey Graham. And out of contention are the Dane Reynolds, the Brink, the Andrini, the Ian Byrne, and the Avalon Strick.
So it's interesting. I guess as if I was to ask you, which one do you think Dave's going to pick as for lack of a better phrase, the winning board? Because I think they're all winners for being involved in this.
So just based on what we already know, the Fletcher Chouinard would be the front runner based on the previous 3 episodes, but there are very big kind of question marks still for the John Simon for me, and now the Ryan Lovelace. And so I could see in episode 4, him having an epiphany experience on those that would make him deem those the winner.
Well, we shall see. Which one do you like the best so far?
I mean, the Fletcher Chouinard seems like the no-brainer, like you'd get that and feel great about it. The other question mark that I have is the Corey Graham. Like, I did not get to see enough waves written on that. It seems like Dave had like, this is 80% good enough. Cool. Let's kind of come back to it. And I don't feel like we've come back to it yet. So I don't have a strong opinion on that board quite yet.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, if I am a conservative better, I would conservatively bet on Fletcher Chouinard, but really hope that something else provides a brand new experience.
Well, understanding that they have had this time that you mentioned to editorialize and to direct this piece, the fact that they haven't spoken at all, or that the Corey Graham's sort of in the back, makes me think that it's going to come into the front and blossom and be the winner.
Yeah, it could. If they were crafting it that way, it could just be a virtue of the fact that he wrote it and liked it and then just got distracted with these other things, and he will come back to it, and maybe it won't be. So I don't know. But answer your own questions. What do you think is the front runner, and what do you like the best?
I think the mullet, the Fletcher Chouinard surfboards is probably the front runner, and that's probably the one that I like the best. It's funny because it always comes down to simple for me.
Yeah.
I think less is more. And that's why I also like the Neil Purchase Jr. And that's why I liked the Dane Reynolds. It just seems like a really simple thing. There's not too many variables. It's like, here's a really cool little outline, put a little double concave in it. Here's 4 fins. But it kind of takes away from the whole, the whole exercise in some ways. It almost feels like there's something that could be tweaked here, and I'm not even sure what it is. But the Fletcher Chouinard board almost seems too contemporary or too status quo, for lack of a better phrase, or not outside the box enough.
So contemporary for the past decade. But if we're looking
sure. But
if we're looking into the future,
yeah,
that's where the asymmetry and some of those other boards become interesting. And when you see the couple of turns that Dave did on the Lovelace that were unlocking new dimensions, that piques my interest.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm always kind of trying to return back to what's the 2-sentence elevator speech here. If you're Sam and the guys from Stab, is the electric acid surfboard test to try to get the rider, Dave in this case, to find his favorite board, or to get him to through time adapt and get to know and understand a unique design, which seems in some regards to be the case, because as we mentioned already, he didn't do the Dane Reynolds board because he's like, I already understand this board. I don't need, and so anyway, I'm sure I'm butchering it here, but I sometimes wonder what's the proposition here? What's the overarching proposal that we're trying to get to?
I don't know if they set that kind of a homework assignment for Dave. I think it's just at the end, you'll know. Like
Yeah.
Dave, you will know. It will reveal itself to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
would
so
agree.
we'll find out next Thursday, about a week and a half away. I got a feedback last week. We were trying to define or distill the difference between, or a new term maybe for high performance. What is, if a massive rail turn can be high performer or is high performance, then how do we distinguish what Felipe is doing, Felipe Toledo or Italo, versus what Dave Rastovich is doing? And Finn Whitla, who's a surfboard shaper out of Tasmania for Phase Surfboards, DM'd me and said, what about high tech? What about Italo? Italo's surfing is high tech, and Dave Rastovich can still be high performance. How do you feel about that term?
I think it's a good stab, no pun intended. And maybe that's high tech. When I think high tech, I think about products. I don't think about end game surfing that's happening. So it's a little high tech to me is, carbon
Doesn't quite.
fiber, Kevlar,
Yeah.
you
Okay. Yeah, performance obviously is implying what the surfer is inputting, and tech is almost referring to the construction, let's say. That's what it would imply. Okay, well, we'll try again. I liked it. We'll try
Yeah.
again.
I have a must-see moment
Let's hear it.
presented by Trees Wax. And you've probably watched this, as it's kind of on everyone's radar. It's the Nathan Florence drop that he did, the European Slab Tour Part 4 with Nathan and his brother Ivan Florence, and they're somewhere in Europe. They score the piece, the little edit, with some sort of like Norwegian Viking skullduggery type music. So it makes you think maybe they're in Norway, and maybe they are, although they're in town in Portugal for the Big Wave Awards, which is also a cool part of this clip. They have the little highlights from the Big Wave Awards with Laura Enever and Jojo Roper and Lucas Chumbo and of course Nathan Florence. All of these and other winners, by the way. I apologize if I missed some of them.
I'll
But
go through them.
check it out.
Very cool. I actually did not see that yet. I haven't taken the time, but it's been on my list. The Big Wave Challenge Award winners, by the way, a couple of weeks ago. Excuse me. Men's Surfer of the Year, 2 years running, Nathan Florence. So congratulations. I think that was a foregone conclusion. As we discussed in the past, his resources kind of trump everybody else's, so he can chase these swells and generate clips monthly. The women's Surfer of the Year was Laura Enever. Young gun, meaning under 18-year-old performance, for Steve Robertson from Haiku Maui. Congratulations. That makes sense. Roberson. Men's Ride of the Year, Soli Bailey at Cloudbreak. That drone shot from Tucker Wooding that I think was our must-see moment back in March when that clip dropped is insane.
That is insane. I'm going to have to go watch that. Figure out what board he's riding.
Well, he's riding, it's a gun.
It's a gun. Okay, yeah. I
It's
won't
like
be
a
out. If I need a gun at Cloudbreak, I'm going to restaurants.
But that's what's insane about it is the way that he navigates that wave, riding a gun, making adjustments, and the drone is right perched above, so you could see every little, subtle maneuver.
That's Tucker. Wasn't that Tucker on the drone?
Tucker Wooding. Yeah, who ended up getting an award himself, actually, Videographer of the Year.
Oh, good.
So congrats to those two.
Yeah.
Women's Ride of the Year, Bianca Valenti at Puerto Escondido back in June. Did you see this wave?
I think I have, but it's not registering right now what exactly took place.
Really impressive, big double overhead right on like a big gun. So she really kind of wrangles that thing. Biggest wave of the year for the men is Lucas Chianca at Nazare back in February. Biggest women's wave is Michelle de Bouillon, also at Nazare. Men's paddle wave of the year, Jojo Roper at Mavericks.
Heck yeah, Jojo. Charging it at Mavs. Congrats.
Major congrats. Women's paddle wave of the year, Katie McDonald at Toto Santos back in February. Wipeout of the year, Trevor Carlson at Mavericks.
Gnarly. That was so gnarly.
So gnarly. Solid acceptance speech from Trevor too. Like, hey,
I didn't see it, but I wonder, like, if you get Wipeout of the Year, like it's kind of a weird award.
That's what his speech was. His speech was, I've heard a version of this speech, by the way, over the years, but it was basically, I'm up here getting the award nobody wants to get. I hope to never see you guys up here again. I hope to never win again, kind of a thing. So it's
Yeah.
pretty funny. And
Yeah.
then an award for the contribution to the sport, which went to Fred Pompermeyer.
Oh, good.
Deservedly so.
Yeah, for sure. That's cool.
And I've got my own musty moment presented by Trees Wax, the only petroleum-free high-performance surf wax, treeswax.com. Tom and I. It's a documentary. Again, something that I watched for the Florida Surf Film Festival. They're going to be screening it next weekend. Yeah, next weekend, I believe. Daytona Beach, floridasurffilmfestival.com. Tom and I is about Tom Curren, as you might guess. Tom Curren, and it's about his relationship with Japanese transplant to Huntington Beach named 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐞𝐬𝐮. And 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐞𝐬𝐮 and Tom met way back in the earliest days when Tom was like pre-15, like 13 years old. And 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐞𝐬𝐮 had developed a love for surfing, was wholly committed to surfing, and invested in a video camera. And so he would show up at contests and film every single heat.
Wow.
Beginning of the day to the end of the day, literally every single heat. And this is a time where it's not like you could post this footage online. You couldn't sell this footage. He was just doing it for the love of it. And so Tom, this is a 40-minute documentary short, by the way. It's interviewing Tom. It's mainly talking to Tom, but it's about this figure that he's known for this many years. And Tom was just saying, like, man, prior to that, we didn't have video review. Like, video review is now just an essential part of learning and improving surfing and all that sort of stuff. He's like, this was the first time, you know? And so the documentary is made up of these interviews, modern day with Tom, but all of this archival footage that this guy shot from all of those years. So you're seeing Tom at 14 years old, footage you've never, ever seen before, completely for the first time. So it's incredible. And then there are a couple little narrative arcs of journeys that Tom went on. And the most one of them is Super Dave, actually a recent journey where he's throughout the documentary, they're showing him like add foam to Super Dave and then shape it down and then ride it in the Rincon Classic a couple of years ago. But one of the events that they document was he and 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐞𝐬𝐮 got sent to Japan for something. And there was this huge typhoon. And it was like double or triple overhead. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, keep going.
Okay, you're nodding your head a little bit. So they find this right-hand point. Tom finds this right-hand point, and they're showing all the footage of it, you know, and all these empty waves breaking. And it's just kind of victory at sea, but it's at a point and it looks triple overhead.
Yeah.
And 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐞𝐬𝐮 like, and then Tom paddled out. And he's like, and I just kept it rolling at all times because I couldn't, through the viewfinder, see there's a wave breaking in front, but there's a set out the back. You couldn't see if he was paddling into it. So I just left it running. And then you just see Tom stroking into this quadruple overhead wave, drop in and just navigate the thing incredibly. Like
that's so cool.
First wave at J-Bay kind of thing, you know, but way more chaotic and like throaty and barreling.
I think I've seen this footage, actually. It's been out there. It's been out there.
This, I said some of the footage you've never seen before. This, I think you're right, had been out there, but it was so impressive. All of the local fishermen are just on the shore watching. They never even seen waves this big. And Tom realizes the board that he's on is a little too small. So he goes in, there's a local surf shop, buys a used board off the rack, like a gun, and then paddles back out, gets detonated on a couple. And it's like, dude, he's out there by himself and he's just figuring it out. Then 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐞𝐬𝐮 goes, and then the craziest thing happened. Quicksilver team showed up, and out of the car rolls Tom Carroll, a young Kelly Slater. Kelly Slater is like the peak, you know, like everybody knows who he is. He's like the golden child. And so 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐞𝐬𝐮's like, holy cow, now what's going to happen? Kelly grabbed a tripod and a camera and set up and filmed. Didn't even paddle out, just filmed Tom.
That's rad.
So
what a gem Tom Curren is. He's such a gem. This story reminded me of a moment. I was on the North Shore and I was taking photos at Waimea Bay. I was up at the little Heiau lookout, you know, shooting down on the bay. And who starts walking down the beach from the parking lot but Tom Curren, and he's got one of his dad's 1959 wooden Waimea Bay guns.
Crazy.
And Tom paddles out, no leash, on a 30-pound wooden Pat Curren gun, his dad's surfboard, and proceeds to just do Tom Curren things, big late drops, swooping bottom turns, makes every wave. I have photos somewhere. I've got them somewhere. And that's the kind of thing, like Tom just J-Bay.
Yeah.
This point in Japan on weird boards, Super Dave. By the way, Super Dave with some trippy fins. He's a gem. He's just an absolute treasure.
He's a savant. So the thing is, you said makes every wave. The style of surfing that he does ensures of it. And when you're watching him surf that typhoon, which they ended up naming that spot Curren's Point after this day.
Oh, cool.
When you watch him, like, he's in critical positions on the wave and he is doing turns, but he's positioned in such a way that he can kind of navigate out of disaster if that were to happen,
Yeah.
It's a really, really impressive, beautiful thing to take note of.
That's how you and I surf 3-foot California. I'm constantly trying to navigate to make sure I'm not going to get into any disaster.
Well, the cool thing too is afterwards when he's on the beach and like Tom Carroll is holding a handy cam showing Tom Curren the footage of himself, and Kelly Slater's there fanning out at Tom Curren. You just realize like he's on a different plane. He's just on a different aura. Like Carroll is fanning out. Kelly's like in awe. Like guaranteed Kelly could retell this experience in minute detail, like, cause it was that informative for him to pull up, see Victory at Sea, crazy typhoon, and he doesn't even paddle out. He just wants to witness what is happening with somebody walking on the water.
And not to take away from what is his name, 𝐂𝐻𝐸?
𝐂𝐻𝐸. So his full name is actually Masahiko Kito, but they call him Kito-san.
So not to take away from Kito-san's movie, which I want to see, Tom and I, it'd been cool if he could have gotten Kelly to kind of watch it and describe it all, because you and I both know he's such a communicator. It would have been great to have his take on it. And Tom Carroll's, by the way, another great communicator.
Totally. Yeah, this is much more simple documentary style. Like they're only interviewing Kito-san and Tom, and it's just about them.
Right.
So they didn't incorporate any other experts or anything, but it's really intimate and beautiful.
That's cool. Is that your favorite movie so far?
No.
What's your favorite?
It's Water Brother is really, really good. The Sid Abruzzi doc.
Yeah.
And then of course I talked about Westerly, The Life and Death of Westerly
God,
last
there's
week.
3 really good ones right there. Right?
Yeah.
How does somebody go about watching these things? Are they available on YouTube?
So they're all on a different kind of release schedule. They're just doing the circuit right now, but they will be released broadly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, make sure to remind us to see them when you find out that they are available for public consumption, because I want to check those out.
The trailer for Tom and I has been up on YouTube for 2 years, so I will include the trailer with today's notes.
Cool. Well, look, David, I'm going to foil in Fiji soon. I won't tell you exactly when, but it's coming up and I'm excited. And the good folks at Waterways have really been wonderful as far as customer service.
Well, they have internet there, so you and I can continue spitting.
That would be cool. Let's do it. But
okay, we'll do it.
Yeah. Until next time, adios and aloha.
All right, Bass, let's remind people this might be their final opportunity to get in on the Jerry Lopez giveaway. The Jerry Lopez hand-shaped glider from a Clark Foam blank closes on November 13th.
A 9.6 hand-shaped Jerry Lopez glider made of one of his Clark Foam blank stock is probably dwindling away. I know he had quite a few of them. And so Jerry Lopez, this is your chance. Go to waterways.com. By the way, how many entries do you think I have?
Real Water Sports.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Real Water Sports. I've gone on to Real Water Sports, of course, as I always do. and I've entered. And so
How many entries?
I could
do
be
you
the
have?
winner. Wouldn't
How
that be
many
great?
entries do you have is the question. And if you try to game the system, they may kick you out of all future comps.
No gaming, just one email, one entry. Let the powers that be, let it all fall into place.
All right. Well, I literally just entered right now while we were talking. I'm pretty sure I entered in the past, so maybe it'll reject this entry, but I did just do it again.
Nice. Real Water Sports to enter the Jerry Lopez giveaway. Do it.
Keep them in mind too, for all of your surfboard and soft good needs. They can ship you a board anywhere on the planet. And they have 1,500 surfboards in inventory. So realwatersports.com. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
See ya.